I'm going to introduce the next speaker here. This is a personal friend of mine, somebody that is an unsung hero of the Kessel Run journey. He was serving on the Defense Innovation Board. Josh Marcuse. Oh my gosh, the number of times he came through for us. When I talk about transformation, you know, everybody knows what Kessel Run was doing at the product level, but we were having to have all these meetings in DC with professional staff members, getting words onto the floor of Congress, and a lot of that legwork was being done by Josh Marcuse. I honestly don't think that we could have scaled if it weren't for the work that he did with the Defense Innovation Board and helping us move forward. It really takes a community or a village to make these things work. So I'm hugely grateful to him. He's one of the best orators that I know in this space. Josh Marcuse, everyone.
Raise your hand if you're a coder. A lot of you. I am not. Never written a line of code in my life. Not really a technologist, just a pretender, an imitator, maybe a translator between different worlds. A translator between the world of the operators, the political appointees, the congressional staffers, the men and women in uniform, the people who make decisions about the organization that Brian described, the Pentagon, where I served for more than a decade, and Silicon Valley. Not the zip code, the ethos, the set of beliefs and values and norms and ways of working that Brian described, that animate Rise 8, that animate your being here. So I sort of accidentally fell into this world of technology, of digital modernization, of DevSecOps. I work at Google now, so I think it worked out well. But I'm not a coder. But I'm here at a conference about coding because of the one thing that I do care the most about, and that's people. I'm a people person. I have a background as an organizational change management consultant. I think about organizational design. I think about applying design thinking to improve our decision making. I view the world through the lens of human beings and networks they form and the institutions they build and the values those institutions reflect. And so I wanted to talk to you about coding because I believe that that is going to define the future of what's possible for our society. And let's think about what's at stake if we get it wrong. A government that is obsolete. Can a government that's obsolete fight a global pandemic, a global financial crisis, a global war? Cannot. Mark Andreessen is famous for saying software is eating the world. And the footnote at the end of that statement should have been, software is eating the world everywhere except in government. There was a revolution, there was a wave that swept over all of our financial institutions and all of our companies. And like a wave, the ship of state rose and fell as that wave passed underneath it, and everyone aboard just kept doing what they were doing before as if nothing happened. And that wave that swept over and changed and disrupted all aspects of our society and our economy and our industry did not disrupt our defense establishment, our defense industry, our government. And that failure has led to so many very severe problems in service delivery for citizens in all aspects of our government. The piece of it that I was exposed to and where I met Brian and where many of you in this audience come to this problem is in the sphere of defense. And I'll talk mostly about defense because it's simply what I know and I want this talk to be authentic and meaningful. But it isn't just defense. It really is all aspects of what we expect our government to do for us. And the cognitive dissonance between consumer digital experiences that are increasingly automated, increasingly intelligent, increasingly fast, and interactions with our government that are the opposite of all those things is one of the most underappreciated factors that is undermining confidence in government. And the lack of confidence in government is one of the things that is eroding our democracy. Let's not forget that it was not long ago that we experienced the very nadir of our democratic experiment. calling into question and threatening things that I assumed I could safely take for granted for me and my children and their children. There is a lack of confidence in public institutions, and it would be foolish to believe that it is entirely disintegrated from people's frustration that no government websites work, no government apps work, government stuff just doesn't work. And why is that? It's because we are living in laws, rules, systems, processes, mindsets, and culture that was optimized for buying hardware with software attached instead of buying software that is meant to run on many forms of hardware. This paradigm shift is fundamental and it's profound. And it's profound in ways that are counterintuitive. But one of the insights that I had is recognizing that management of human beings by human beings is a technology. It's not the natural order of things. It was invented by people for their interests. And one of the key moments in that evolution of the social software on which our society runs was the invention of the printing press, maybe followed by the invention of the pocket watch, followed by the invention of the telegraph. These were technologies that enabled smaller and smaller groups of humans to make bigger and bigger decisions for larger groups of humans to organize their labor. This is the technology that societies are built on, that creates civilization. But let's not get confused about what those things are. These are technologies that people use in order to create bureaucracies. We use bureaucracy as a dirty word. I have my whole career. You just heard Brian talk about bureaucracy hacking. But bureaucracy is not the problem itself. Bureaucracy is a system of control to solve tragedies of the common. It is a system of control in order to enable people to create change at scale. Leaders higher and higher in management pyramids that want to have reliability and consistency and predictability about what workers will do need to create ways of information flowing up and down and create schedules in order to have predictability. Otherwise, it would be chaos and anarchy. So bureaucracy is not evil. It is a technology that has outlived its utility. It's just too old for the challenges that we have today because of the invention of a new technology that is a better way of managing people to achieve a mission. That new technology that falls in this stream of important things that begins with the wheel, and ends with a pocket watch is like agile software development. And I think if we think about government reform and government modernization in the context of what does this new way of working in a digital world mean for the ability of government, the ability of a bureaucracy, the ability of teams to deliver more value for their mission. And it upends all the things that we were taught. It enables you to be more rapid. It enables you to be more iterative. It enables you to be more experimental. It enables you to take more risk. It enables you to be more responsive. It enables you to be faster. It enables you to be able to deliver an experience of interacting with your government that is as delightful and as effective and as efficient as what consumer electronics, consumer companies have offered. And if we can find a way to use this new way of thinking about work and this new way of thinking about productivity to enhance and modernize what our government delivers, that is how you re-inspire confidence in democracy. When you walk up to a voting booth and it looks like a piece of you-know-what junk, it looks like a typewriter, it's got a dingy, curtain over it, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel like you're part of this great democratic experiment? No, it feels old. It feels obsolete. You get a brand new, shiny digital voting booth, like the experience of voting feels like our democracy is new and modern and we are renewing our commitment to each other. This is a metaphor for thinking about all of the things that we do when we build. So that's why I believe that software is so much more than just how we produce a new kind of product. I believe software is a new way of thinking about what our mission is, what our role is, what our purpose is, how we serve what we do. It has extraordinary power. But the flip side of this also is if we don't awaken ourselves and the systems that we live by and govern by and use to these changes, we will be crushed by technical debt. Literally, technical debt like an elephant sitting on your face and just grinding you into dust. Like the technical debt that I witnessed in the Department of Defense, the dissonance, the gap, the deficits between the analog world and the digital world was leading to a whole bunch of really, really destructive behaviors. And those destructive behaviors come at the intersection of this obsolete technology for managing people of the bureaucracy, enforcing the rules of the old system in a way that it was designed to snuff out and destroy the early harbingers of the new system. And this is actually a very well understood problem. Clayton Christensen, Innovator's Dilemma, describes it in exquisite detail. The old and the new have a very hard time coexisting peacefully. They threaten each other. In the minds of single individuals, psychologically, they threaten each other. In the institutional preferences of different organizations that are competing against each other, they threaten each other. This is why lots of very well-intentioned, patriotic Americans in uniform tried to destroy Kessel Run over and over again. Not because they're bad people, but because they are prisoners of an incentive system that created them. And they were not able to change cognitively to the new paradigm. They can't even see the new paradigm. So what looks like opportunity to people that are excited about applying agile software development principles, to them looks like risk. It looks like unacceptable, dangerous risk. Cost, schedule, and performance risk. Something they can't control. If you've been bred to believe that leadership is about control, then the very idea that we would not be able to define a requirement 2 years in advance and predict 2 years in advance exactly how everything would be built and what all the features would be and who the customers would be. If you couldn't predict it very far in advance, it means there must be something fundamentally wrong with the project. And it would be dangerous to invest taxpayer money in it. It would be a risk to your career. It would be a risk to the mission. Who here has heard something along the lines of like, these manuals were written in blood? They're not trying to snuff out this whisper of the future because they're evil. They're just not informed. It's our job to inform them. It's our role and our purpose to show them. We have to do this, or our democracy as we understand it will actually perish, which seemed like it was hyperbole, but now doesn't really seem like hyperbole quite so much. The reason why it's so important actually isn't even the reasons I've given you. There is yet a still greater reason why I think it's even more important than what I said. And that's artificial intelligence. So Brian said to me, he wanted to talk a bit about my time at the Defense Innovation Board. It was a surreal experience, best professional experience of my life. It was amazing. Ash Carter, Secretary of Defense at the time, invited Eric Schmidt, then the executive chairman of Alphabet, to form a new advisory board for him and other leaders in the department to advise them about innovation. And the question that every leader asked Eric Schmidt, who had been the CEO of Google for a decade, was about artificial intelligence. It was 2016 at the time, 2017. The key moment that really focused everyone's attention on this was a game, actually. It was a game of Go between a software program written by some developers in London and a company called DeepMind that Alphabet owned, called AlphaGo, and Lee Sedol, the reigning champion of Go. And if you think about the progression of using artificial intelligence to play games, we went from chess to checkers and through, and it was perceived that Go, because of the order of magnitude of permutations beyond chess of different players, that Go was the greatest test that we knew of artificial intelligence capability to surpass one of the leading minds on the earth. And so it was probably exaggerated in its significance, but it felt to many people at the time watching this space, as I know many of you do, like this was the ultimate showdown between man and machine since Garry Kasparov and Deep Blue, and that it was an even bigger deal. And now we actually have really interesting stuff going at CMU with AI playing poker, which is a game of bluffing, which is, I think, probably an even more interesting test. Spoiler alert, AI is better at poker than many humans, certainly better than me. But back to our story. So there was this crucial moment where this Go game was played, and AI beat Lee Sedol, the world famous Go player. And that was, in Eric Schmidt's words, the Sputnik moment for the Communist Party, that AI was going to dominate the future of warfare. After all, Go is a game of war. And shortly thereafter, Putin, who turned out to be even more threatening than any of us imagined, made a similar comments about whichever country controls AI will rule the world. And you have all of these grand pronouncements 5 years ago. And that led all of these different strategic leaders, both parties, Congress, DOD, all the civilians in OSD, many of the four-star generals, to be interested in, well, what are we doing with AI? And so that was kind of our first task. So we went out visiting locations all around the world to find the AI or tell the department what to do with AI. We figured out that AI is written in PowerPoint and machine learning is written in Python. But we still wanted to figure out where we were going to be on the innovation adoption curve that I was describing for this paradigm-shifting technology. And that was really the lens through which Eric Schmidt and the other board members discovered just how far behind DoD was in the adoption, not of AI, but of just basic modern software development. And in order to explain how all of these different technologies fit together to really, really impressive, inspirational, very senior experienced leaders who had no idea what any of these technologies meant, I tried to invent a kind of cognitive shortcut to help them understand it. And I'm explaining it to you because all of you are going to be in positions or are already in positions of needing to explain the strategic significance of these technologies to various leaders. And I called it the digital value chain. And the purpose of the digital value chain is to take these different ideas in digital modernization that were foreign to most of these leaders and help them have a construct to put them together to make it meaningful to a lay audience like myself. And it begins at the foundational layer, the first link in the chain, with data. The importance of treating data as a strategic asset. I'm sure you've heard things like data is the new oil or the new, the data is a strategic asset, et cetera, et cetera. And that's true, but that's not how the department sees it, regardless of how many directives you put out. And this is true for the whole government. You treat data as a strategic asset like water or fuel. You think about what resources you want to invest in preserving or exploiting it. Most of the systems that we've encountered in the department treat data as some ephemeral, epiphenomenal byproduct, not the central product, not the focus, but in the words of Will Roper, like the exhaust that comes off the jet. So like F-22, F-35 is all these elaborate systems for recording an unprecedented amount of flight data, but no way of storing or offboarding or analyzing that data when the plane lands. Because we just assumed that after the mission, you would wipe it and start over again. Less flash memory in an F-35 than in an iPhone. Why? Because the data isn't a strategic asset. If data were a strategic asset, someone would have put as much time, energy, and effort into writing a phone book-sized requirement for what to do with the data. But only in the last couple of years, mostly due to the work of Dave Spirk and others, have we started to think about data as a strategic asset. But that is a leading indicator, not a lagging indicator. If there are a handful of places in the department where data is being treated like a strategic asset, for every one place where you see an example of excellence or even the promise of potential, there is at least dozens of others where we are dealing with an obsolete system where there's no sense of how to use that data to improve the performance of that system. That's why it's so difficult to implement predictive maintenance programs on all of our legacy hardware systems. They're not designed for that the way we would currently design literally anything to have data as a strategic asset. One of the main reasons unconsciously why DoD leaders cannot treat data as a strategic asset is because for them, the prospect of storing all of it is terrifying. Because they think about data in human scale, not machine scale. When they imagine a database, they are literally imagining a giant Excel table in the sky. Right? And they're like, I don't understand how we would process all this data, because they themselves are imagining a human mind trying to tabulate the rows and the columns. And that's why we have endless configuration board meetings about what format the date in a form should be stored at, because they've never encountered a transform function. They don't understand how machines would be able to interpret this through an ontology. They don't understand that. So for them, they would spend months arguing over whose data format is going to be bigger and badder and over someone else's data format. And I would just sling them the table in these meetings being like, you guys don't need to fight about this. You can fight about something important. The machine solved this for you now. And it's very hard for them to understand that. And so if you are in the government system where every year the cost of one unit of storage, transport, and compute goes up, and if you are watching all of the Forbes and Wired magazine headlines talking about the explosion of data every year, you just withdraw into a hole, because they're looking at this saying I have more and more data than I ever know what to do with, and every year it costs me more. And what we explained to them was, in the commercial world, every year we set a target of a cost reduction. And we are able to provide more free storage to the world than your organization can pay 10x for, because we set those units. They don't understand how modern commercial cloud has changed the data gravity of organizations and enables a possibility of a new paradigm of thinking about data with an infinite scale of storage. They're still stuck in gov clouds that have hopelessly limited scope and scale. So that brings me to the second link in the digital value chain, commercial cloud. Once you have the data, you need a place to store it that makes it affordable to own and accessible to use. Most people trying to do a machine learning problem in the government spend 85% of their time and budget on data wrangling, because we don't think about ways to store data to make it accessible to use. We have norms and values about data ownership that prevent sharing it because of the old paradigm. So once you think about the data you need and you think about access to commercial clouds to store it in, you can make it available for people to use for their purposes and start to align incentives, where access to other people's data is a mission enabler for everyone, rather than preventing people from seeing your data. And then people always say, but there are nuclear weapons on floppy disks, and also what about very compartmented information? And what about? I'm like, okay, that's fine. If you have them super compartment SAP program with the social security numbers of all of your assets, and people are spying on their governments, you're you can keep that in a air gap if that makes you feel better, a little security blanket for you. But 99% of the data we're talking about isn't even classified or shouldn't be. For 99% of use cases, the only way to get on the commercial curve of making the data bill affordable to own is for government to be in the same boat as the rest of the companies. And the only way to do that is commercial cloud. The whole idea of a gov cloud is obsolete in 99% of cases. So the second link of the digital value chain is getting the government on the same innovation adoption curve of cloud-based technologies as the rest of the world, in order to take advantage of the leverage economically. It isn't even to take advantage of the technologies that are available, the new features that roll out. It's a simple fact that it's not possible for the government to afford to build a gov cloud that can compete with the commercial cloud and have it grow at the scale the data is growing forever. It is one of the facts of the two paradigms colliding that I'm describing. It's just a failing economic strategy. It's actually already failed, and only now is government realizing it. So once you have the data and a useful cloud to store it in, then you can do application modernization. That's where the software comes in. And I'm not going to talk more about that. You guys understand all of that. But they're asking Eric Schmidt about AI, and they haven't done the data, the cloud, and they have no software people. Everywhere Defense Innovation Board members are going, they're saying, can I meet your software engineers? And everyone's scratching their head. We don't track that, they say. That's not one of our job codes. It's not something that we value, is the subtext of what they're really saying. It's something that we've historically chosen to outsource. because the software just came packed into the box that I bought. Why is it so much easier to buy a box than it is to buy a software license? I mean, any smart defense company is literally just building software and putting them in belts and boxes, if you get the reference. And like, that's a better way to have a product strategy in the defense market. Like, I've even been in meetings where like people have seriously proposed this. They're like, we just need to take our software program and like figure out a way to load our algorithms into boxes and just ship them the boxes. Because this is how DoD wants to buy this stuff. And the lack of software people drives all the other problems, because who is at the table to advise you on what your data strategy should be? Who's at the table to advise you on what your cloud strategy should be? I lived through that one. I'm not even going to mention the 4-letter word that starts with J and has to do with Star Wars. That you all know what I'm talking about. If you don't have software people, who informs all these other decisions? I mean, thank God for Chris Lynch. It was like Thermopylae for that guy. Every single decision the department had to make that touched software, you had to find someone from the Defense Digital Service to try to like push crazy out of the room. That's not a winning organizational strategy. You can't have the SWAT team of nerds break down every door in which a decision is being made in an organization that spends $750 billion. If the software people aren't embedded and integrated into the way you think about your organization, dare I say, embedded and integrated into the bureaucracy, then you are doomed to continue to reenact the same kabuki theater of the outdated bureaucratic mindset that gave us all of the decisions we're currently saddled with. So once you actually have some places like Kessel Run or the other 40-ish software factories where people understand the norms and the values and the goals and the new ways of working, now you can talk about applying machine learning. Not even super interesting, bespoke, military-specific use cases. Just adopting commercially available machine learning tools that are available to all the other companies and consumer products of the world, but applying them in a context that's relevant for the mission. And the recommendations that we make to these leaders is, please don't try to go to a research lab and create some bespoke algorithm to do some unique military mission when you haven't understood how to adopt machine learning tools and applications that have been built by mature product companies and tested elsewhere. Let it be a ladder. Let yourself have time and space to learn. Allow yourself to get good at these things, but recognize you have to eat your vegetables before you have dessert. You can't just sprinkle AI pixie dust on things in an organization that doesn't have data, it isn't labeled, they don't understand how it's organized, they can't share it, they can't get it to a user, they don't have any kind of cloud resources to spin up the capacity that they need, they don't have software people who can tell them how to avoid certain mistakes or how to seize certain opportunities. You can't actually get to AI without having those other things. But even once you do, right, then you have the edge cases that our military leaders are obsessed with. I need to find this particularly unique kind of thing in this particular kind of terrain, and there's no commercial use case for this, so I have to have my own special snowflake of an AI project. And I know where all of the venture-backed AI companies are, but I only want to buy AI from certain companies that are within 100 miles of my office here in Washington, D.C., where we know all the real AI happens. And I'm a proud Booz Allen alum, so I don't mean to cast any aspersions. But it's a big and complex economy. And it gets into all the acquisition challenges we're not going to talk about today and the cultural challenges attendant on those. But you can't have the kind of AI applications to compete with great powers until you've done the first 4 links. So let's imagine a world in which all those things happen. Then there's 2 more links. And it brings us back to where we started. After you have access to some of these technologies, you have to think about how it changes your strategy. If you agree with me that the first shot fired in a competition between great powers will be fired in cyberspace, metaphorically, and it will be an automated attack, because why would you bother with anything else today? You are required by the Principle of Defense Dominant to have an automated defense. We are in a space where cyber warfare is going to be bot on bot. Automated offense, automated defense. The escalation ladder for that cyber attack will eventually lead to a cyber physical system. We've seen that happen in Europe over the last decade. And that escalation ladder will lead for a cyber physical system to a human loss of life, and away we go. We have to be able to contain and control that escalation ladder. But that escalation ladder will be driven by unprecedented speed, hyperscale of war. It's also true in a pandemic when you're trying to race the mutation to contact trace patient zero and get ahead of the spread of a virus. It's true in many use cases, but what we are experiencing from the wheel to the printing press to the stopwatch to the telegraph to the software development is the acceleration of change. And nothing is going to accelerate change faster than the spread of artificial intelligence in every aspect of our society, to include warfare. So the stakes for not getting the software people into the organization and giving them the gift of the opportunity to use their talent and their art and their gift to do their job is that we will miss the boat on artificial intelligence. And if the democracies of the world miss that boat and the dangerous autocracies of the world don't, then we could arrive at a place where our competitors have been faster in the innovation adoption curve than we have been. And that terrifies me. So remember that so much of what inspires you to be here with each other is about improving service delivery. It's about living your values at work. It's about just modernizing things in the way that we should, but also have in the back of your mind that what we are trying to drive is institutional growth, with the end goal of adopting the technology that will certainly disrupt our entire society. And failure to get the DevSecOps piece right means that down the line, we will never get to the point where we can really, truly adopt responsible, ethical, artificial intelligence for all of the missions our government needs. So I want you to look around the room and just remember that you all, regardless of what your boss says, what the appropriators say, what the headlines say, you all are surrounded by people who believe this, are committed to this, are willing to fight for this, want to be part of the community that Brian described that is dedicated to this. And that is about so much more than just shipping prod, right? That is about protecting and defending what we hold dear. That is why this matters. Thank you.